you know, as it turns out, just a few weeks ago, the last time I had Dr. Peter McCullough in studio, he was traveling and just finishing up his book with his co-author, John Leake, at that time. And so we had the opportunity to sit down to talk to the both of them. This is my conversation about the courage to face COVID-19. Joining Dr. McCullough and I is author John Leake. John, thanks for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So just very quickly, how did you meet Dr. Peter McCullough?
I was home visiting my family in Dallas over the holidays at the beginning of 2020. They shut Europe down. We naturally, on our side, shut our side down too. I began paying very close attention to the story, and I began to wonder, well, is there someone on the medical side who has academic medical authority who is taking a different view of the matter from the official one?
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking around, and then I discovered Dr. McCullough, and then I discovered he lived about a mile away from my family home. So I contacted him, and I did an interview with him in May of last year. And that was the beginning of our conversation that led to this book that we're working on.
What is the goal of the book?
You know, the goal overall is to lay the historical framework for how this could actually happen, how the whole world could get into this simultaneous lockstep, this type of thinking with respect to pandemic response. And the idea is that there was a small group of doctors, myself included, that in a sense had a courage to face COVID-19, to treat COVID-19, to start to manage this. But at the same time, we were battling this giant, mega biopharmaceutical government complex.
Right. Is it a fiction piece, or is it?
No, it's true crime.
Yeah.
If you read a lot of true crime, and you read a lot of true crime history,
Yeah.
you become adept at spotting distinct patterns of fraud.
Yeah.
And you know, I was very interested in this OxyContin story, the Purdue Pharma Sackler family story, and I came across the article in the New Yorker in 2017, which then became this big book. And I called my literary agent at the time. He said, "Well, it is a great story, the Purdue Pharma, but someone's beat you to the punch."
Yeah.
But it was really looking into that story that I began to realize on a very large scale, the biopharmaceutical complex with its friends in the FDA, its lobbyists, can really shape a phenomenon, public perception of a phenomenon, in this case, the addictive quality of OxyContin, and conceal the true danger of it.
Yeah.
There's so many different elements. It's such an enormous story that we've had to kind of find a narrative thread. And I would say the narrative thread is Dr. McCullough's efforts working together with his fellow physicians to try and tell the truth of what we've been up against, starting with the suppression of early treatment.
Right.
And that's really the focus of the first book, is the suppression of early treatment.
When you think of medical tyranny, it seems like you need to know who the bad guy is, yet I feel like in this conversation we keep saying we're not exactly sure how high up this goes or who's pulling the strings ultimately. Is that a problem when you're trying to write a book like this?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if you look at these huge international foundations that have gotten very interested in, for example, mass vaccination, Robert Kennedy talks about the capture of these regulatory agencies. We've seen this in the financial industry as well.
Right.
The revolving door between Goldman Sachs and the Treasury, or the SEC. This is very, I think, intelligible anthropological phenomenon that we're dealing with here.
As you look at it as an author, does it appear to have sort of a dystopian novel feel to it?
It does. When I was a kid growing up in Texas in the 80s, we were assigned George Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm, and I just remember thinking, well, this is this is a story of the foolishness and the tyranny of the past. This could never happen again. And we see now this censorship and this sort of thought police, and you know, you've expressed a point of view that is in some way heretical, so we're going to censor you. And I mean, you think, are we back to Orwell?
Yeah. You know, my dad was the one that gave me Brave New World in 1984. And I remember what bothered me about those books was you kind of start where it's already a problem. You already start where Oceania, you know, there's a war going on. You never see this sort of, like all of these places. And my question was always, how did you get there? And I feel like these last couple of years, and I'm sure there was like a slower grind here, but this pandemic, these 2 years, has unearthed things in a perspective of the world I live in that's either, I mean, I keep asking myself, is it just super accelerated right now, or have I just been blind and asleep at the wheel? As a doctor, I mean, you're so, you know, entrenched in reality, right? I mean, medicine's reality, what's really going on with you. Do you find it difficult to wrap your head around the state of the world?
I do. I think the rapidity of things is so fast. Like how this virus could, in a sense, come here uninvited as this cloud that just influences. And I think so much of, from my perspective, it's driven by fear. I think for the first time, physicians, nurses, and others, they had a fear that they could get it themselves. For the first time, they had a fear of their patients. I have patients who's told me yesterday, my primary doctor still has not seen me in 2 years. They're still on telemedicine. They're still in a grip of fear. But what happened very quickly was, I think in a very overt way, doctors were told they should not treat COVID. So for the first time, they were told not to treat a serious illness that was resulting in large numbers of hospitalizations and deaths. And they were relatively public, clear-cut examples of doctors losing their job because they attempted to treat and help patients with COVID-19. That itself should have been the most newsworthy bomb that went off.
Yeah.
That doctors attempting to care for patients were being threatened. It was not just, it was pressure, there was coercion, there wasn't just threat of reprisal, there was reprisal, and there was professional damage. What happened on the patient side, for the very first time, patients were told that they don't have any autonomy. Normally patients can kind of say what they want. No, they couldn't. And they lost what's called shared decision-making. Shared decision-making means that the doctors and the patients share together, like, oh, we're going to use these drugs or that drugs, we're going to do this or that. That once those things were lost, then what happened? Patients got into the hospital. It became basically the most frightening event of so many families. Millions of families in America now think of the hospital as this horrific place where their loved one was put in isolation, the family members could not visit, there was no discussion of the types of treatment that occurred, and then in the worst cases, the patients died.
Peter treated his own father in the very early stage of this thing, and there was no guarantee of success. It was his father. And we'll tell the story.
Yeah, well, my father was in a nursing home. He was one of the first people in this large Dallas nursing home to get COVID, and we just had to go with it in terms of the principles. And the principles include reducing the self-inoculation, getting fresh air, don't keep rebreathing the virus, using things to sterilize surfaces. We didn't know about virucidal oral nasal washes. I wish we did. I would have used them. But we certainly used hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin. We didn't know about steroids back then, so we didn't get any steroids. That was rough to treat. You know, he probably had the original Wuhan wild-type strain. But we knew about anticoagulants, and he was immobile. And I said, boy, that's something. And so we used, that's probably what saved him. He got very sick in the middle, very sick, but he pulled through.
It's incredible. So books going to come out. What is the goal? What do you want the book to achieve? Is it just a good read, entertainment, or do you have?
Well, I think what we are looking at is a true crime story, and I think the suppression of early treatment was an act of fraud. It may amount to an act of something like mass homicide. So I think it's a true crime book, and it should be documented as such.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you're both involved in documenting what may be probably the most interesting and horrifying moment, at least in modern history. I look forward to reading it myself. Thank you for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to come and join us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Peter McCullough and John Leake, both for joining me in the studio to have that great interview, but also taking the time to write this book. You know, there's been some great books out there. I love Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, but the approach to this, to bring in a crime writer, is really so brilliant in John Leake. To think that, you know, if we look at this through the eyes of a crime book, I just think that this is going to be such a unique way to tell this story. So you can go to the website, couragetofacecovid.com, click on buy now. Everybody should get a copy of this book. Obviously, celebrate those people that are going out of their way to bring information to us. Also a great gift, obviously, for all of your friends. I'm